I did have a colleague one day that I was working with. She always was talking about who was who and who was what and where they lived and what they lived in. And she came up to me one day and she says, "Dean, I've got something I have to tell you." And I says, "Oh my, it must be good. It must be really good. Tell me, what is it?" She says, "Do you know that this particular person is married to a black man? That her husband is a black man?" And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Are you sure that he's a black man?" And she said, "Yes, he's African American. You can tell he is African American." And I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Well, she's not African American." "Oh, no, she's not. But can you believe that she has the audacity to be married to a black man?" I said, "I can't believe. How in the world could she do that? How could she marry a black man? Oh, he's filthy. He's just dirty, isn't he?" Well, I didn't say he was dirty or filthy. I said, "Well, he must be because he's an African American." I said, "And you know what? She's filthy and he's filthy. And you know, I have a little secret I need to tell you. I'm filthy too, because my great-great-grandmother was a black woman." And she dropped her mouth to the floor and she said, "You're kidding. That is not so." I said, "Oh, yes, it is. My great-great-grandmother is a black woman. So that makes me African American too." I said, "So now I am African American and I'm your friend." She couldn't believe it. Oh boy, she didn't talk to me much after that. I have a great aunt that back in the 60s came down with a blood disease. She almost hemorrhaged to death. Well, they found out at that point that through different testing that she had sickle cell. And they were astonished that a white woman would have sickle cell anemia or would have the sickle cell trait, period.
And they found it in my sister here in Wilmington. Dr. Sharon found it. Sickle cell, but he didn't tell her because they said white people didn't have it. And he sent her to Duke, and they told her in Duke.
So my great-grandmother, finding this out, came out and told the Heritage then. And with that knowing, they sent our whole entire family, the hospital here in Wilmington sent our whole family to Duke Medical Center.
So all Mama's girls, we all had to go to Duke to have a blood test. And it showed up in all 5 girls on my mama's side.
Comes to find out there were a few that did not have it, but the majority of my family has been diagnosed with sickle cell trait. And today I have sickle cell trait. My great-grandmother grew up in Dixon, which is in Onslow County, right outside of Jacksonville. And her mother cared for her and took care of her until she was 5 years old. She had 3 older brothers. She was the baby. Uncle Otto, Uncle Edward, and Uncle Charlie. They looked African American, especially my Uncle Otto. So one evening, it was in the summertime, and he had lots and lots of watermelon patches. And he would tell them that they could not eat anything until the end of the day, until it was time to come in out of the fields. They could get a drink of water, but they could not eat breakfast, they could not eat lunch, they could only eat one meal a day, which was at the end of the day. And he would tell them that they could, if they touched one of his watermelons, or if they touched one piece of vegetation out of his gardens or out of the fields that he grew, he knew exactly how many were there, that he would whip them or that he would kill them. And her 3 older brothers, which Uncle Otto was a lot older than she was, tried to take care of her. But with her being the young girl, she had to take on the role or the responsibility of taking care of the men. And her father would would literally make her cook dinner at 5 years old, or cook supper, or breakfast, or lunch. And she told us the story about how her father would have great big barrels of flour and meal, and she would have to dig into that flour and into that meal. And she said, being a little 5-year-old girl, her biggest fear was that she would fall into that flour barrel and no one would ever see her again. She remembered her father beating her mother into the floor until her death. But in the records today, the death, or the cause of death, is told that she had lung failure, that something happened in her lungs that made her lungs collapse. And at that time, he was a very wealthy man, and his name was George Simmons. He owned a lot of land. Actually, the land that Camp Lejune is on, he sold that land to the military. That was his land. So they worked on his farm with him, and he was a very harsh man. They couldn't sleep in the main part of the house. They had to, even though that they were his children, they could not sleep in the main part of the house. They had to sleep in the back of the house. He was so mean, and he didn't really care about them until he didn't care about their health or their well-being or anything, just as long as they worked, because they were niggers in his opinion. They were of, this woman that he slept with, and what I literally say is, my great-grandmother says, he raped their mother, and 4 children came from that, and they were his responsibility. And so instead of him saying that they were his 4 children, he just used them as field hands, and said that this field hand just had children, and he had to take care of them since she died.
Uncle Ed, Uncle Otto, Uncle George, and Mama. And he'd come in drunk and beat them and mama them. And he pulled my uncle tied a rope to his leg and pulled him up in a tree and beat him with a horse lash. Ah! Ah!
He would call them niggers all the time. She thought that was her name. And he would say, "Get in there, little nigger, and cook me something to eat." And she said she remembered having nightmares about her mother, about her father beating her mother to death. And so Uncle Otto and Uncle Edward at the time, or Uncle Ed, tried to think of a plan to kill their father, or to kill this man that was their biological father but was not really their father.
And he come up on the porch and they shot him.